Welcome, Game Chasers everywhere, to episode 17 of the Collecting Confidant with your host, GunstarHero. And I'm back this week with something a bit different. So up until now, I've been primarily focusing on limited print physical games, and I thought that in a way to expand the channel, I'd start extending it to also retail games that I find really interesting and that may not always get the same amount of consumer traffic like that the big ones like the Grand Theft Autos, the Call of Duties, the NBA 2Ks get. Some of the more niche oriented or just very cool retail releases that are coming up, especially because, let's face it, Ninja Turtles Cowabunga Collection's coming out soon. We're going to get a release date and I want to talk about that, but it's not going to be available via the typical boutique sites. So let's get into this week's compilation, because you know I love the compilations. We're going to get into Pac-Man Museum Plus, which came out on May 27, 2022, physically for the PS4, the Switch, and the Xbox One, and you can also get it digitally on the PC. This is a sequel to the original Pac-Man Museum, which came out only digitally February 24, 2014 for the PSN, Xbox Live Arcade, and Windows. This includes most of the games in that original compilation, including a few that have yet to be re-released. So that's pretty exciting in terms of a preservation standpoint. So let's get into the game and why you should consider getting this very reasonably priced compilation of goodness, especially if you're a Pac maniac going back all the way to the early 80s like myself. You're going to find a lot to love here. So the game itself includes 14 titles from Pac-Man history, from the puzzlers to the platformers, to modern renditions, arcade stuff, console stuff, you name it. It's all accessible via very cool customizable arcade where you walk around like Pac-Man. You actually access all the games via little arcade machines. And initially when you get the game and load it up, you won't be able to access all the games. You'll have to unlock some of them, but it's not that hard. You just have to go play some of the titles twice, get in there, unlock the rest of the library, and have at it. While you play the games, you'll be earning coins as you accomplish some of the missions. You'll also be unlocking background music, which can be played via a jukebox inside the arcade. You'll unlock little decorations that you can put around the room, in addition to backgrounds, flooring. The more you play the games, you'll see visitors come into the arcade, like some of the ghosts and other characters. And then in the arcade itself, you can take some of the coins, spend them on the games that aren't free play. Eventually, you can unlock a free play option. You can also go and buy additional arcade decorations from the vending machine, play tunes on the jukebox, and you can even go to a very cool gashapon machine and buy capsules, which give you even more decorations. So for the customizable enthusiast, you'll find a lot to love here. And then, of course, in terms of the game itself, the games are either emulated or provided from the original source code. You can get CRT filters, save states on the classic games, and there are online leaderboards as well. So let's get into the list of games and some of the new additions and some of the controversies that some of the purists and the preservationists might find in this compilation. All right, here we go. So the first game on the list, of course, is the granddaddy of all, 1980s Pac-Man, which started the whole revolution. And this game is brilliant, nearly perfect, is still as wonderful as it was 42 years ago. This was one of the very first games I ever experienced. And I mean, come on, if you've never played Pac-Man, where have you been? It's the classic chomper. You avoid the ghosts, collect the pellets, grab the power pellets, you go and chomp the ghosts back down. It is so wonderful. The only reason I say near perfect is because I'm one of the people in the camp that actually believes that Ms. Pac-Man is better. And that's part of the controversy here, because if you are aware, Ms. Pac-Man, since basically the mid-'80s, has been the center of a lot of litigation and legal troubles and royalty issues, because if you're not familiar, Ms. Pac-Man originally was not developed by Namco. It was actually developed by a couple of MIT students as a hack to the original Pac-Man, and because it was so good, they pitched it to Midway, who had co-rights at the time for the arcade versions, and then Midway went ahead and then pitched it to Namco. So for a while, Namco and the original creators had some sort of kind of like agreement that the original creators would get royalties from the coin-op cabinets, and all was fine, but the legal troubles persisted over the decades, and now it's become so bad, especially now that At Games has gotten involved with their arcade one-up machines. It's gotten so annoying and irritating that Namco is actually starting to pull back from Ms. Pac-Man as a character and replacing her slowly with Pac-Mom. So instead of the red bow that you're going to get a pink hat instead, which means that her appearance in some of the games on this collection, specifically Pac in Time, Pac Attack, and Pac Land, they actually had to go in and scrub her original visuals with the red bow and replace her with Pac Mom. So if you're a purist and like a total preservationist, these games aren't exactly intact the way you remember them, which means, in my opinion, that if you have old physical copies of Ms. Pac-Man lying around, like I have the Genesis version, it's in storage, I didn't pull it out for this video, I believe over time, those are going to go up in value. Regardless, though, it is a cosmetic thing. The games, from a playing perspective, are still intact. Let's get back to the list. So we talked about Pac-Man. After that, you've got 1982's Super Pac-Man, which is a little bit more of the same, but this time, instead of collecting pellets, you're chomping down on fruits, and you can become bigger so that you can crash through these gates rather than collecting keys to open them. I thought this was a lot of fun, but even more fun than that was the follow-up in 1983, Pac and Pal, which is also included here, where the mechanic here is that you actually have to flip over cards, which then produce an item later somewhere else in the level, which you have to collect before Miru, the other character in the game, goes and steals it, and you can go steal it back, and it's like this cat and mouse game. I found this actually to be a lot of fun and really compelling. After that, you get 1984's Pac Land, which was a total different game. We had like a side-scrolling, endless runner, which is going to be frustrating to modern gamers in terms of its not only deceptive simplicity, but also some of the irritating but learnable mechanics in terms of the jumping, the running, and the timing can definitely be frustrating at first as you start to get used to this game. But once you get used to the flow and the timing and how to especially float in air during some of these hard jumps, you will get into this game and it will start to draw you in. So that's from 1984. After that, we get 1987's Pacmania, which was basically like a 3D isometric reimagining of the original Pac-Man, but now includes a jump feature, which at first may make the game seem a little less challenging than some of its previous counterparts, but you will notice the AI starts to ramp up really quickly and give you that challenge you're looking for. Following up with that, we have Pac Attack, which was a puzzle game. On this version, we have the Super Nintendo version, which on the previous version, we actually had the Genesis version of this on the first museum. Now they're using the Super Nintendo version in 1993. Even though this seems like a bit of a generic puzzler, there's a lot of charm to this, especially the single-player puzzle mode, which is 100 levels long, where you have to put the blocks and the ghosts in a certain way because you only have so many lives to figure out the puzzle. I found this really cool and actually drew me in quite a bit. So for a puzzle game, liked it quite a bit. Then after that, we get one of the new additions to the collection that hasn't been re-released until yet. We have 1995's Pac in Time, which was originally released for the Super Famicom. This is a side-scrolling puzzle platformer, which I'm going to admit is a bit dated and archaic in terms of its mechanics. Didn't really draw me in too much. To be honest, I didn't even really figure out how to get out of the first level, and I didn't really bother checking a strategy guide because it wasn't really holding my interest. But nonetheless, from a preservation standpoint, it's awesome to see its inclusion for historical reference. Moving on from there, we get into Pac-Man Arrangement, and these, again, are some of the new inclusions that haven't been released as of yet. We've got two versions. We have the original arcade version, which came out in 1986. This was only available in the arcades via the Namco Classic Collection Volume 2. And then you got its PSP counterpart, which came out in 2005 on the collection Namco Museum Battle Collection. This is a cool reimagining of Pac-Man in the sense that, yes, it retains the same mechanics, but in terms of very cool graphical styles, you've got different level layouts, which are intriguing, you've got power-ups, and then you've also got boss battles at the end of each world, in addition to a very cool continue system that'll keep you playing right through the credits, and I found myself totally addicted to both of these versions. I finished them both and loved the hell out of both of them. So awesome to see these finally included. Moving on from there, we're getting into the modern stuff now, which is getting really excited. And the next one I want to talk about was one of the major reasons I bought this compilation. I'm so glad to have this in physical format, but I'm also kind of torn on its inclusion. I'm going to explain why. Pac-Man Championship Edition. I did allude to this in the Tetris video, how I think Pac-Man Championship Edition DX is one of the greatest remakes ever made. Now, Championship Edition itself, which is included in this one, which came out in 2007, only digitally. It did get some physical releases on 360 and DS, but it's great to see it here. This is kind of like the modern speedrunning version of Pac-Man, where it's based on speed, but also a new mechanic that you go through the level, you collect fruits, which then unlock dots in another part of the level, and you're constantly racing to get all these different fruits while the time is working against you. The graphics, the sense of speed are extraordinary, but here's my gripe. It's not the DX version, which is just so much better. It's got the multiple ghost trains, it's got the bombs, all the different levels and graphical layouts. I fell in love with that game when it came out on the PS3 back in, I think, 2010, 2011, somewhere around there. But unfortunately, it is still stuck in the digital ether and has not gotten a physical copy as of yet. So Namco, if you're listening, please put out Pac-Man Championship Edition DX in addition to Galaga Legions DX, and I'll be a happy boy. So now that we're in the modern era, there's a couple more games that haven't been re-released in a number of years. That specifically is Pac-Motos and Pac-and-Roll Remix, both of which were included on the Namco Museum Remix and Mega Mix for the Wii. These came out back in 2007, and these games are decent. You can tell they were designed for the Wiimote. They've got the Pack and Roll is reminiscent of Super Monkey Ball, and then you've got the Pac-Moto, which is kind of like this game where you just bash players off of the level, you fight bosses. Overall, pretty cool for a few stages, but then because of some of the controls and the challenge and the difficulty and some of the balancing issues gets a little irritating. So even though it's cool to see these included from a historical perspective, I wasn't as entranced by these ones. But then it gets better. We're going into 2011's Pac-Man Battle Royale, which only came out in the arcades. I played this on a tour through the US back in 2013, and I was in love with this. This can be played up to 4 players, and just like in the title, you each take control of a Pac-Man. You're avoiding ghosts, but also trying to chomp down on each other. And this game is a blast. If you can get a few buddies to play this game is so simple, so fun, and so addictive. You gotta play this one. Plus, it uses those Pac-Man Championship Edition neon-style graphics to give it that flair. Okay, and then finally, the 14th one, and I'm gonna say this right now is probably worth the price of admission because this game is amazing. Pac-Man 256 finally gets preserved via physical. This was the game that came out back in 2016, originally on mobile devices, was then later ported to the PS4 and Xbox One. Wow, talk about reimagining. This is just like an endless runner, procedurally generated, where you just move up through the game board and try to get the ghosts, get power-ups, use lasers, ice attacks, and bombs. But not only are you trying to avoid the ghosts, you're trying to avoid the game world itself. It's like you can see the debug code creeping on you from the bottom, pushing you to keep going and going. This game, every time I turn it on, I forget where the time goes. I just get lost in it. And this for me alone is worth the price of admission in addition to the other 13 titles. This compilation is just bursting with value. And I'm not going to get too much into the physical version. It's pretty simple. You get the box, you get like a disc and no manual, kind of like how it happens with modern stuff. You can get this also on Switch and Xbox One, and the price is right. We're only talking about for the PS4 version and Xbox One, $19.99 US. You can get this via Best Buy. You can get this via GameStop. But then the Switch version, which I would almost say is probably the best way to play this version because I'd say this compilation deserves to be played handheld. For some reason, it has that Nintendo tax and is a little bit more expensive at $29.99 US. Still a very fair price. Such a great compilation. I honestly, if you're into Pac-Man, other than missing the DX version of Championship Edition, I can't recommend this enough. You've been watching the 17th episode of The Collecting Confidant with your host, GunstarHero. Make sure you like and subscribe. Thank you to all the new subscribers and commenters, and we'll see you on the next one. Later, Game Chasers, and peace.